Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we are exploring something, something you literally can't live without, your immune system. We're going to really get down into the weeds today and talk about all the cells and tissues that are working nonstop to keep you healthy.
That's right. It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
Yeah, so we're going to be using chapter 2 of this immunology textbook as our guide. And let me tell you, it is a real eye-opener. I mean, we often take our immune systems for granted. But this chapter really digs deep into how complex and how crazy adaptable it actually is. It's
Mhm.
incredible.
Yeah.
Just imagine having to respond to basically an unlimited number of microbes. Like at a moment's notice, you have to
Okay.
track down all those threats that can spread all over your body. And to top it all off, you have to do it all with a limited number of cells that are hyper-specialized.
Yeah, that's just the immune system in a nutshell. Always up for a challenge.
It sounds impossible. But that's exactly what our immune systems do every single day.
So let's start by just, talking about the key players in this microscopic war that's constantly going on inside of all of us. The immune cells themselves. It's like a team, right? A super well-coordinated team with each cell having its own specific job to do.
Exactly. And just like on any well-run team, you need a clear system for organization and identification. We have the myeloid and lymphoid lineages.
Yeah.
Those are the two major branches of immune cells. And they both come from those multi-talented hematopoietic stem cells. You find them in your bone marrow.
Yeah.
And to keep track of all the different cell types, scientists use what we call the CD nomenclature, which is basically like giving each cell a unique little barcode.
Oh, so it's like a name tag at a conference.
Yeah, exactly. It tells us exactly what each cell does. Okay, I'm starting to see just how incredibly organized this system is. So let's dive into some of the individual players now. The textbook mentioned these cells called phagocytes, and honestly, they sound like something out of Star Wars, the way they like engulf and destroy microbes. What's the story with these guys?
Phagocytes are like the frontline soldiers of the innate immune system. We have neutrophils, for example.
Huh.
They're the first responders, the ones that rush into the site of infection, ready to take on any invaders they find. They're like the SWAT team.
Wow, so they're like the first ones on the scene.
Yeah.
But then who cleans up after the battle?
That's where macrophages come in. They're kind of like the more experienced members of the phagocyte family. They get there a little bit later, but they stay a lot longer. They clean up not just the microbes, but also all the dead host cells and all the debris left behind after the fight. They're like the cleanup crew, making sure everything's neat and tidy again and helping the tissues repair.
Oh, so they're like the cleanup crew and the construction workers. That's amazing.
That's a great way to put it. But wait, there's more. They also release these things called cytokines, which are like little messages that alert other immune cells that there's trouble and that they need to come help.
Hold on. So not only are they eating invaders and cleaning up the mess, they're also directing traffic and calling for backup. Macrophages are busy. The textbook also mentioned different types of macrophages, like M1 and M2. What's the difference between those two?
Oh, that's a good catch. Yeah, macrophages are super adaptable. They can change what they do depending on the situation we're in. So the M1 macrophages are like the attack dogs. They're the ones that are specialized for fighting infection. They release these really potent cytokines that call in the trips. And then we have M2 macrophages. They're more like the peacekeepers. They focus on calming everything down after the fight is over and helping to rebuild the tissue that was damaged.
Wow. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, huh?
Mm.
The immune system really has a specialized cell for every situation. Now, the textbook also mentions some other cells called mast cells, basophils, and eosinophils. They seem kind of dramatic, though, with all their little granules packed inside them. What's their deal?
Oh, yeah, those are the guys that love to make a scene. They're full of these granules. They have all sorts of inflammatory stuff inside them, like histamine, which can trigger, your classic allergy symptoms.
Ah, so they're the ones that are responsible for all the sneezing and itching and all that fun stuff. But I'm guessing they have a more important role than just, making us miserable.
Of course. Their main gig is actually defending us against parasites, especially these large multicellular worms called helminths.
Helminths.
Yeah, so they release all that inflammatory stuff, which can actually be pretty toxic to parasites, and then they call in the other immune cells to come help them fight off the invasion.
So they're like the special forces unit deployed when we encounter those bigger, tougher invaders.
This whole signaling system is really amazing. It kind of reminds me of Paul Revere riding through the night, warning everyone that the British are coming. Which brings me to another cell type that the textbook talked about. Dendritic cells. How do they fit into all of this?
Oh, dendritic cells are like the ultimate messengers.
Yeah.
They connect the innate immune response with the adaptive immune response.
Yeah.
They're basically constantly patrolling the body, looking for anything suspicious. And when they find an invader, They grab a piece of it, which we call an antigen, and they run to the nearest lymph node to show it to the T cells. They're basically saying, hey, look what I found. We got to do something about this.
So they're like the scouts gathering intel and bringing it back to the headquarters.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And just like there are different types of scouts, there are also different subsets of dendritic cells, each with its own specialty.
I see. I see. We have classical dendritic cells, plasmacytoid dendritic cells, monocyte-derived dendritic cells, and Langerhans cells. Each one has its own unique way of capturing and presenting antigens. So they make sure that the immune system really understands what it's up against.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how this all fits together, but we're just scratching the surface here. Up next, we're going to dive into the fascinating world of lymphocytes. They're the real stars of the adaptive immune system. These are the cells that can actually remember past infections and launch a super targeted attack. They're really the heroes here.
Definitely. Can't wait to get into that.
Stay with us. Welcome back. So before the break, we were learning all about dendritic cells, those amazing scouts of the immune system. They're the ones that, trigger that whole adaptive immune response. But what happens after that? How do those signals actually turn into a full-blown defense against all those nasty invaders?
That's where lymphocytes come in. They're the real stars of the adaptive immune response, like a team of elite special forces. They can recognize and target specific threats with incredible precision.
Yeah. The textbook was talking about how lymphocytes can create these antigen receptors that are specific to a particular threat, like a key that only fits one lock. It's amazing. But how in the world do they create such a huge variety of receptors? It seems impossible.
Well, it's pretty much straight out of a science fiction movie. It's this incredible feat of genetic engineering. Lymphocytes can actually shuffle and rearrange their own DNA. It's like a giant deck of cards being constantly shuffled and dealt.
So they can create millions of different combinations.
Exactly. This process is called VDJ recombination.
Mhm.
And it makes sure that there's always a lymphocyte out there with the right receptor to recognize pretty much any antigen we might encounter.
Okay, so it's like having this massive key ring with every possible key you could ever need.
That's a great analogy. But of course there's a catch. With all this random shuffling going on, how do we stop lymphocytes from attacking the body's own cells?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
It would be disastrous if our immune system turned against us.
Absolutely. To prevent that lymphocytes go through this super intense training program, both B cells in the bone marrow and T cells in the thymus, they're tested to see if they react to the body's own molecules. Any lymphocyte that looks like it might attack the body is immediately eliminated. Only the ones that pass this test, the ones that can tell the difference between self and non-self, those are the ones that are allowed to mature and join the immune system.
So it's like weeding out any potential traitors, right?
Exactly. And even after they mature, they're still under constant surveillance. There's this whole network of signals and checkpoints that keep them in line and make sure they don't go rogue.
Wow. So it's not just about having the right weapons, it's also about having really good control systems in place.
That's amazing.
Absolutely. It's all about finding that perfect balance between being able to fight off anything that comes our way, but also not hurting ourselves in the process.
Yeah.
It's a pretty delicate dance. It is. Okay, so we've got these highly trained lymphocytes, each with their own unique antigen receptor ready to fight. But how do they know when and where to go? Do they just wander around aimlessly hoping to bump into their target?
Nope, not at all. Lymphocytes are way too organized for that. They have a very specific travel plan. They circulate through the body, checking the blood vessels, the lymphatic vessels, and they hang out in those secondary lymphoid organs we were talking about before.
Right, like the lymph nodes, the spleen, and the mucosal tissues. Those are like their strategic outposts.
Exactly. And they don't just show up randomly. They're guided by this incredible system of chemical signals called chemokines.
Chemokines.
Yeah, they're basically like little homing beacons. They attract lymphocytes to specific places.
Oh, so it's like each lymphoid organ has its own unique smell, and the lymphocytes with the matching receptors are drawn to it.
I love that analogy. Yeah, that's exactly how it works. And this ensures that the right lymphocytes end up in the right place at the right time to meet their target and mount an effective response.
Amazing. So lymphocytes are on patrol, searching for their target.
Yeah.
What happens when they finally find it? Do they just go in guns blazing solo mission?
Not quite. When a naive lymphocyte, one that's never seen its target before, finally encounters its match, something incredible happens. It triggers clonal expansion.
Right, the textbook mentioned that. It's like hitting the copy button on those specific lymphocytes, making a whole army to fight the invader.
You got it. The lymphocyte gets the signal to start dividing, and it just goes crazy. It creates thousands, sometimes even millions of identical copies of itself. This massive expansion is crucial for mounting a strong immune response.
So it's more like a full-scale war than a duel.
Exactly. And as those clones multiply, they also become specialized. They turn into what we call effector cells, which are like the soldiers on the front lines ready for battle.
And each type of effector cell has a different job, right?
Right. For B cells, those effector cells are called plasma cells, and they become these antibody factories, churning out tons of antibodies that are specifically designed to target that invading antigen.
Antibodies, they're like guided missiles seeking and destroying the enemy.
You got it. And then for T cells, they differentiate into different types of effector cells too. We have helper T cells, which are like the generals. They coordinate the whole immune response. And then we have cytotoxic T cells, which are the ones that directly kill infected cells.
Wow, so we have this massive army of clones, all specialized for different tasks, and they're all working together to fight off this one specific threat. It's mind-blowing.
It is. And all of this happens within a matter of days. It's incredible how fast and efficient the adaptive immune response can be.
But what happens after the invader is defeated? Do all those effector cells just die off?
Most of them do, but thankfully some survive and become memory lymphocytes. They're like the veterans of the immune system. They remember the enemy, and if they ever encounter it again, they can respond even faster and stronger next time.
Ah, so that's how we build up immunity to certain diseases. The immune system remembers the bad guys, and it's ready for them if they ever try to come back.
Exactly. It's a pretty brilliant strategy taking advantage of the immune system's awesome memory.
Wow, this is incredible.
Yeah.
It really makes you appreciate how complex and sophisticated this whole system is. It's constantly working to keep us healthy.
Right. It never stops learning and adapting.
Well, we've only just begun to scratch the surface of the world of lymphocytes. After the break, we'll dive even deeper into their development, from their humble beginnings in the bone marrow and the thymus, to their transformation into those highly specialized warriors we've been talking about. Welcome back. So before the break, we were talking about, the incredible journey that lymphocytes go through. They start out by encountering an antigen, then there's that crazy clonal expansion thing, and then they turn into all these specialized effector and memory cells. It's really amazing how much they change throughout their lives.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of curious about their origin story. Where do lymphocytes actually come from in the first place?
Oh, that's a great question. The development of lymphocytes, or lymphopoiesis as we call it, it's a super fascinating process.
Mm.
And it's tightly controlled every step of the way. It all begins in the bone marrow, which is like the birthplace for all blood cells, including those early lymphocyte precursors.
So it's like a nursery for all the different immune cells.
Exactly. It's a really busy place with hematopoietic stem cells constantly dividing and differentiating. They're the ones that give rise to all those different cell types that make up our blood and our immune system.
Okay, so lymphocytes get their start in the bone marrow.
Yeah.
What happens after that?
Well, from there, they kind of go their separate ways. The B cells, those are the antibody factories, remember? They stay in the bone marrow to finish up their development. But the T cells, they take a different path. They migrate to the thymus.
The thymus.
Yeah, it's this little organ that sits up in your chest, and it's like a specialized training ground just for T cells.
I was right, like a boot camp for T cells.
Exactly. The thymus creates this unique environment that's super important for T cells to develop and mature. It's where they learn to tell the difference between the body's own cells and foreign invaders. That way they don't attack the wrong thing.
That makes sense. We definitely don't want our own immune system turning against us.
Definitely not. And the training in the thymus is really tough. T cells that show any signs of recognizing the body's own molecules are eliminated right away. Only the ones that can prove that they're tolerant to the body's own tissues are allowed to mature and become part of the immune system.
So it's like a really strict quality control process.
Yep. And it's not just a one-time test either. They go through multiple rounds of selection to make absolutely sure that they can recognize foreign antigens, but they won't attack the body itself. It's a really delicate balancing act, but it's crucial for having a healthy immune system.
Wow, it's amazing that so much has to happen perfectly during this process.
It really is. But this whole intricate selecting process is what makes the adaptive immune response so powerful and precise. It's how our bodies can fight off such a wide range of threats without hurting ourselves in the process.
So B cells mature in the bone marrow, T cells mature in the thymus, and along the way they create those unique antigen receptors and go through that intense selection process to make sure they're not self-reactive. What happens to them after they graduate from these training grounds?
Well, once they've finished developing, they enter the circulation as mature, naive lymphocytes. So they're ready to patrol the body and search for their specific antigen.
Right, we talked about that earlier. They travel through the blood and the lymphatic vessels, and they hang out in those secondary lymphoid organs, waiting to encounter their target.
Exactly. And those secondary lymphoid organs, like the lymph nodes, the spleen, and the mucosal tissues, that's where the real action happens. That's where those naive lymphocytes meet the antigens presented by the dendritic cells, those scouts we were talking about. And that's where the adaptive immune response really kicks into gear.
This whole journey of lymphocyte development is incredible. From their humble beginnings in the bone marrow and the thymus to their transformation into these highly specialized warriors, it really makes you appreciate the power and precision of the immune system.
It's mind-blowing when you think about it, and we're still learning so much about how these cells develop and function. Every day there are new discoveries being made.
It's really amazing to think about all these complex things happening inside our bodies every second of the day, all working together to keep us healthy.
It really is. It makes you appreciate the resilience of the human body.
Definitely. Well, I think our listeners are walking away from this deep dive with a much deeper understanding of how the immune system works. From those busy little phagocytes gobbling up invaders to those highly specialized lymphocytes launching their targeted attacks.
I hope so. It's a really complex system, but understanding even the basics can make you appreciate all the amazing things your immune system does to keep you healthy.
And who knows, maybe we've even inspired some future immunologists out there.
You never know.
Well, this deep dive has been a real adventure. We've covered so much ground from those amazing immune cells to the intricate network of lymphoid tissues. We've learned about how lymphocytes develop those incredible antigen receptors and how they make sure not to attack the body's own cells.
It's been a fascinating exploration of one of the most important systems in the human body.
I think we've given our listeners a really solid foundation in immunology and hopefully sparked their curiosity to keep learning about this vital part of human biology.
Absolutely. The immune system is constantly evolving, and there's always more to learn.
So to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the immune system. We hope you've enjoyed the journey and that you've come away with a newfound appreciation for all the incredible work your immune system does every single day to keep you healthy.
And don't forget to stay curious. There's a whole world of amazing science out there waiting to be discovered.
Until next time, stay healthy, everyone.